Jake Miller wiped the grease off his hands as the cold Ohio wind slipped through the half-open garage door of his small repair shop. The place was old, the tools second-hand, and the bills stacked higher than he wanted to admit. Still, he worked with quiet determination, fixing anything the townspeople brought in. On that chilly afternoon, he heard the hesitant sound of small wheels scraping the pavement. Outside, when he stepped out, he found a little girl in a damaged wheelchair, accompanied by an anxious nanny. The chair looked barely functional, and the girl looked tired but hopeful. Jake approached gently, kneeling beside the wheelchair so he was eye-level with the girl. "Hey there, I'm Jake. What's your name?" She smiled shyly and whispered, "Emily." Her wheelchair had loose bolts, bent spokes, and jammed brakes, clearly unsafe for any child to use. The nanny explained they had visited 3 repair shops, all refusing the job. Jake didn't understand why anyone would turn them away, especially when the girl looked so vulnerable. He told them he would take a look and wouldn't charge anything until he was sure it worked perfectly. As Jake rolled the wheelchair inside, Emily watched him closely, as if studying whether he could be trusted. He noticed the fear behind her eyes, a fear no 8-year-old should have. He examined the chair carefully, finding several mismatched parts. Some screws were too small, others too old, and one wheel had marks that suggested it had been forced into misalignment. "Who usually fixes your wheelchair?" he asked softly. Emily looked down, avoiding eye contact. "A man who comes to our house," she murmured, "but I don't like him. He's mean." Jake leaned back confused. Nothing about the repairs looked like honest mistakes. They looked intentional. He continued inspecting, taking notes in his old notebook. Meanwhile, Emily's nanny paced nervously, clearly afraid of something she wasn't saying. When Jake removed the cushion to check the internal frame, he paused. Inside the metal tubing was a screw so loosely fitted that any sudden movement could have caused it to snap. Emily could have been seriously hurt. His stomach tightened with anger at whoever had been tampering with something meant to keep a little girl safe. Trying not to scare Emily, Jake kept his voice steady as he explained the issues to the nanny. She listened, horrified. "Her chair shouldn't be in this condition," Jake emphasized. "This isn't normal wear and tear." Emily looked at her nanny with wide eyes, asking softly, "Did I do something wrong?" Jake immediately shook his head. "No, kiddo, none of this is your fault." He took extra care to speak gently, sensing how fragile she felt. In that moment, it became clear to him that Emily rarely heard kind reassurance from the adults meant to protect her. Jake removed the back panel of the chair next, examining the wiring of the small motor assist system. Something else caught his eye, a tiny device attached to the underside of the frame. It was no bigger than a coin, hidden so well that anyone without mechanical experience would miss it. Jake's heart skipped. It looked like a tracker. Who tracks a disabled child? His thoughts raced as he tried to understand what kind of situation Emily was living in. He didn't want to alarm her, so he quietly pocketed the device, planning to investigate later. Emily watched him with curiosity, asking questions about every tool he used. Despite her fear, she seemed drawn to Jake's calmness. He explained the function of each part in simple words, making her smile. She laughed when he dropped a wrench and pretended the wrench was running away from work. That laugh hit him hard. It sounded like a sound she didn't get to make often. The nanny wiped her eyes when Emily wasn't looking. "She likes you," she whispered. Jake simply nodded, feeling the weight of responsibility settling deeper. As he checked the final wheel, Jake looked up and asked Emily what kinds of things she liked to do. Her answer broke his heart. "I used to go to the park," she whispered. "But now my chair breaks a lot, so Mom says it's safer to stay home." Jake could tell she missed the outside world. It wasn't fair. A wheelchair was supposed to give her freedom, not trap her. When he gently pushed the wheelchair forward for a test, it barely moved. Someone had clearly ensured it wouldn't function properly. That wasn't neglect. It was sabotage. Jake stepped back, exhaling slowly. He needed to fix this chair properly, but he also needed to figure out who was behind the damage. Emily deserved more than a simple repair. She needed safety, stability, and someone who cared enough to notice what was happening. He glanced at her small hands resting in her lap, trembling slightly. Jake made a silent promise to himself. No matter how long it took, he would fix her wheelchair better than ever and uncover the truth behind its condition. He couldn't walk away from a child who needed help this badly. As he began gathering the right parts and tools, Emily leaned forward and asked softly, "Are you sure you can fix it?" Jake smiled warmly, placing a hand over his heart. "Emily, I'm going to make your wheelchair so good it'll feel like new, and you'll go to the park again. I promise." Her eyes lit up with hope, a fragile, precious hope that made Jake more determined than ever. He didn't know what danger surrounded her, but he knew one thing for certain. Emily had walked into his repair shop for a reason, and now he wasn't going to let her down. Jake worked late into the evening, repairing each damaged section of Emily's wheelchair with precision. He replaced every bolt, realigned the wheels, and refitted the motor system so it would run smoothly again. But his mind wasn't at peace. The tracker he had found weighed heavily in his pocket. He kept glancing toward the door, expecting someone suspicious to appear at any moment. The neighborhood was usually quiet, but tonight the silence felt different. The nanny sat anxiously in the corner, checking her phone over and over, her face pale. Emily hummed softly, unaware of the danger surrounding her. Just when Jake finished adjusting the final wheel, bright headlights shone through the repair shop windows. A sleek black SUV pulled up, the kind you'd expect from someone wealthy or powerful. The nanny stood up instantly, her whole body tensing. The door opened and a tall woman stepped out, wearing a long beige coat and looking breathless, as if she had rushed straight from somewhere important. When she entered the shop, Jake recognized her immediately. Sophia Bennett, one of the richest businesswomen in the state. She ignored her surroundings and ran straight to her daughter. Sophia knelt beside Emily, wrapping her arms around her tightly. Emily hugged her back with surprising force, whispering, "It's okay, Mommy." Sophia's hands shook as she examined the wheelchair, her relief turning to confusion. She glanced at Jake. "You're the one fixing her chair." Jake nodded respectfully. Sophia tried to maintain composure, but her eyes flickered with worry. "My assistant said there were problems again," she said softly. "I've replaced this chair twice this year. It keeps falling apart." Her voice cracked. Jake exchanged a knowing look with the nanny, who lowered her gaze, unable to speak. Jake took a breath, wondering how much he should reveal. He didn't want to startle Emily, but he also couldn't hide the truth any longer. "Ma'am," he said carefully, "your daughter's wheelchair wasn't just worn out. Someone has been tampering with it." Sophia froze, her lips parted, but no words came out. Jake continued, showing her the mismatched screws, the forced misalignment on the wheel, and the damaged frame. Sophia's eyes widened with horror. She covered her mouth with her hand as she absorbed every detail. "This isn't an accident," Jake said quietly. "Someone did this on purpose." For a long moment, Sophia didn't speak. Emily looked between them, confused by the tension filling the room. Jake gently stepped away from her and reached into his pocket. "There's something else," he said. "I found this attached to the underside of her chair." He placed the small tracker in Sophia's palm. She stared at it as if it were a deadly weapon. The nanny gasped. Sophia's knees nearly buckled, and she gripped the counter to steady herself. No, this can't be happening again," she whispered, her voice trembling. Jake caught the word "again," but she didn't explain. Jake took a cautious step closer. "Ma'am, do you know who might be behind this?" Sophia's expression shifted, fear mixed with anger. She swallowed hard. "There was someone," she admitted shakily. "A Former employee. He threatened me after being fired. Said I would regret ruining his life. She clenched her fists. I increased security. I hired professionals. I did everything to protect Emily. Her voice broke, filled with guilt. But I never imagined he would go. After her wheelchair, I thought we were safe. Emily reached out to hold her mother's hand, sensing her distress, even without understanding fully. Jake felt urgency rising. If this man had gotten close enough to sabotage the wheelchair multiple times, he might be watching even now. He looked at the nanny. Did anyone follow you? She shook her head quickly, but didn't look convinced. Sophia pulled Emily close, holding her as if shielding her from the world. Jake's tone grew firm, protective. We need to call the police immediately. This isn't something you can handle alone. Sophia nodded slowly, her eyes shimmering with tears. She pulled out her phone and dialed, her hands trembling so badly she could barely press the buttons. While they waited, Jake pushed the repaired wheelchair forward to test it. The wheels moved smoothly now. No shaking, no catching. Emily clapped happily, unaware of the dark truth behind the repairs. But when she looked at Jake with pure trust in her eyes, something inside him solidified. He would do everything in his power to help this little girl stay safe. He wasn't a cop, he wasn't rich, but he had skills and intuition, and right now, that mattered more than anything. Sophia watched him silently, noticing the care he put into every adjustment, the way his focus never wavered. When the police arrived, the atmosphere shifted instantly. Officers inspected the wheelchair, photographed the tracker, and took statements. Their faces turned serious when they saw the intentional damage. This is no ordinary case, one officer muttered. Sophia stood beside Emily protectively, answering every question with shaky breaths. Jake described everything he found in detail. The officers thanked him, stating that his discovery may have prevented something far worse. Sophia listened to every word, her eyes filling with emotion. She wasn't a billionaire in that moment. She was a terrified mother who had nearly lost her daughter without even knowing it. As the officers prepared to leave, Sophia turned toward Jake. Her voice was soft, trembling, but full of sincerity. You didn't just repair a wheelchair, she said, with tears streaming down her cheeks. You may have saved my daughter's life. Jake looked at Emily, who smiled innocently from her newly repaired chair. He swallowed, overwhelmed but calm. I'm just glad she's safe, he replied. But deep down, he knew this wasn't over. Whoever had targeted Emily was still out there. And Jake had somehow stepped into a world far more dangerous than a small-town mechanic ever expected. The night after the police left, the repair shop felt strangely quiet. Jake locked up and sat alone on a stool, replaying everything that happened. He couldn't shake the feeling that the danger wasn't over. The tracker, the tampered screws, the frightened nanny, and Sophia's trembling voice all pointed to something bigger than he initially thought. He wondered where Emily was now, if she was safe, if her mother had security surrounding their home. As he washed his hands, the scent of motor oil still clinging to him, he realized this encounter had changed something in him. He cared more than expected. Sophia barely slept that night. She kept checking on Emily, watching her breathe as she slept peacefully, with her toy bear tucked under her arm. Every soft breath Emily took reminded her how close she had come to losing her. The next morning, Sophia's security team showed her footage from nearby cameras. A man lurking near their driveway 2 nights ago. It wasn't clear who he was, but Sophia recognized the shape of his posture, the same disgruntled employee who had threatened her. Fear shot through her chest. She needed to protect Emily at any cost. The next afternoon, Sophia drove back to Jake's shop, this time without the nanny. She found him repairing an old pickup truck, sleeves rolled up, fully absorbed in his work. She watched him for a moment, appreciating the calm he seemed to carry, even when things were chaotic. When he finally noticed her, he stood up, wiping his hands on a cloth. "Is Emily okay?" he asked immediately. Sophia nodded, but her eyes were heavy. "She's scared," she admitted, "and so am I." Jake didn't hesitate. He invited her inside and offered her a chair, knowing she wasn't there for small talk. Sophia explained everything: the new security footage, the threats, the fear that the man was still watching them. Jake listened carefully, his jaw tightening with each detail. "You did everything in good," he said softly, "but Emily needs stability, not fear." Sophia nodded, tears forming. "Jake, you saw what others didn't. You cared when others brushed it off. You treated my daughter like she mattered." Jake looked down, humbled. "She does matter." Sophia took a breath. "I want to do something in return." Jake raised a hand quickly. "I don't want money." Sophia smiled faintly. "Good, because that's not what I'm offering." Sophia reached into her bag and pulled out a folder. Inside was a proposal for a foundation, one that would provide affordable mobility repairs for disabled children across the region. She wanted Jake to run it, to build it from the ground up, using his skills and heart. "You saw what that wheelchair meant to Emily," Sophia said. "There are thousands of kids like her, kids who don't have someone like you." Jake stared at the papers, stunned. Him? A struggling mechanic with overdue bills, running a foundation? The thought terrified him, but the idea of helping more children sparked something powerful inside. Before Jake could respond, the shop door opened slightly, and a small voice whispered, "Jake?" Emily rolled in, her newly repaired wheelchair gliding smoothly across the floor. She smiled softly, her innocence shining through despite everything she'd endured. Jake knelt next to her. "How's the ride?" He asked. She giggled, spinning the wheels with ease. "It feels like I'm flying." Her joy filled the room with warmth. Sophia watched the interaction, realizing Jake had given Emily more than a functioning chair. He had given her confidence. Emily took Jake's hand and whispered, "Mum said you saved me." Jake's throat tightened. Emily then reached into her small backpack and handed Jake a drawing she made. A stick-figure mechanic fixing a wheelchair, with a little girl smiling beside him, and a heart floating above their heads. Jake felt emotions he hadn't experienced in years surge through him. He hadn't just repaired metal, he had repaired a piece of Emily's world. Sophia placed a hand on his shoulder. "You're the reason she's smiling again." Jake exhaled slowly, overwhelmed. The decision in front of him no longer felt like a burden, it felt like purpose. But danger still lingered, and protecting Emily wasn't finished. Their conversation was suddenly interrupted by Sophia's phone buzzing. She answered quickly, her face draining of color within seconds. "He's been spotted," she whispered. "Near our neighborhood. Again." Jake felt his stomach drop. Emily clutched her mother's arm, frightened. Jake stepped in immediately. "You can't go back there right now. Stay here until your team secures the house." His shop wasn't fancy, but it was safe and quiet. Sophia hesitated, then nodded. Emily relaxed only when Jake stayed beside her. They waited together as security updates came in. Eventually, Sophia received confirmation that the man had been taken into custody. She cried silently, overwhelmed with relief. When the danger finally passed, Sophia turned to Jake with renewed resolve. "I still want you to lead the foundation," she said firmly, "not because of the danger, but because of the heart you showed." Jake looked at Emily, who beamed at him with absolute trust. He thought about his life, working alone in a small shop, fixing cars just to survive. But this was different. This was meaningful. He nodded slowly. "I'll do it." Emily clapped happily, her voice bright. "Jake's gonna help other kids like me." Jake smiled at her, knowing this moment would change everything for all of them. That night, as Sophia and Emily left the shop safely surrounded by security, Jake stood in the doorway, watching them go. For the first time in years, he felt hope rising in his chest. He wasn't just a poor mechanic anymore. He was someone who had made a difference, someone chosen to bring freedom and safety to children who needed it most. The stars above the Ohio sky shimmered as if recognizing the shift in his life. Jake closed the shop door with a new sense of purpose, knowing that Emily had not only entered his shop, she had entered his heart and changed his life forever.